Welcome to Plutus Project-Based Learning 2024 from Gimbalabs and Friends. This is the video to accompany lesson 202.2, where you will learn how to mint native assets with Cardano-CLI. Before you start this lesson, make sure that you've completed lesson 102.1, because you'll need access to a Cardano node running on preprod and Cardano-CLI. In this video, I'm going to show you how to run these commands locally because I have a node running on this computer. But you can also complete this lesson directly in your browser by using Demeter run as demonstrated in lesson 102.1. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the wallet you created in lesson 102.1, and you're going to learn more about how Cardano-CLI works. You'll learn how to mint tokens. And you're often going to hear tokens referred to as native assets on Cardano. So just know that these terms are really interchangeable, and make sure to read the introduction to this module for a little bit of background on why they're called native assets. To mint our first tokens, we're going to create a simple minting policy for a token that can be minted if a particular signature is present in the minting transaction. We're going to write what's called a native script, and we're going to derive a currency symbol from that. And here's just another vocabulary thing. Currency symbol and policy ID really mean the same thing, so we're going to use those terms interchangeably throughout this course, and you'll see this in a lot of projects as well. Now, there's accompanying code for this lesson in the course repositories. If you choose transaction examples, you'll see this repo on GitHub, and that's what we're going to be using today. Before we jump into that, let's just do a review of some of the transactions we've seen before. In Module 102, you learned how to build a simple spending transaction that unlocks one UTXO from a wallet, sends 5 million Lovelace or 5 ADA to some receiver address, and then sends the change back to the owner of this original UTXO. We store that as a sender address. So this is a pretty simple transaction. In lesson 102.3, then, we added one thing to this transaction. In this transaction, we consumed two UTXOs, one that just had some Lovelace in it, and another that had a native asset. And then we made our output 2 ADA plus 12 of that native asset. And once again, we sent the change back to the original sender. Let's go one step further in this lesson. We're going to build a transaction where, once again, some receiver gets some quantity of a new token that we're going to mint in this transaction. The minting part happens right here. We say we're going to mint this number, quantity, of this token. You can see right here, these two variables are the same, policy ID.token hex. And we'll dig into this detail in just a minute. And then we also have to specify a minting script file right here. But everything else looks pretty similar until we get down to this line where we're also going to add an additional required signer to this transaction. We didn't have to do this in previous transactions because it's implied that if we are unlocking any UTXOs, someone's going to have to sign for those. But in this transaction, we're using signing for a different purpose. In this case, it's to validate that some new token can be minted. So we add this line right here. This is the overview of the transaction. Now, let's dig into the details by taking it one step at a time. For this demo, I'll be working in the PPBL 2024 transaction examples repo in my terminal. But before I jump into that, I just want to show you in the gitignore file, we're ignoring a wallets directory and the PPBL 2024 CLI wallet directory that you created earlier in the course. So that means that when I work in these directories, I know that nothing I'm doing here is going to be pushed up publicly to GitHub. And that's really helpful. So feel free to add other directories to the git ignore on your own device if you want to, especially if you ever start contributing to this course. But let's jump into the terminal, and you can make sure to pull the latest changes. If you're not sure if you have them, you can always run git status or git log -- one line, where you can see what the latest commit is. So you can see F52B right here. And that, let's see. Yeah, indeed, that's the latest commit right here on the repo. Good. And if I list my directories, you can see that I do have this PPBL 2024 CLI wallet directory. So I can cd into that. I can see the files that I created earlier in the course. This skey file is just as sensitive as your mnemonic words, right? So I'm showing you this on pre-prod, but of course, if this was a mainnet skey, I'd want to treat it securely. For demo purposes, we're safe for now. In the step-by-step outline, you'll see that the first thing you'll do is create a new directory, and then we're going to generate a new key pair called minting.vkey and minting.skey. These names can be anything, and this doesn't result in any change to the sorts of keys we have right here. You could call this any nonsense word. It's just an identifier for the key pair that we're going to use. I'm going to go create this directory right here in my same wallet directory. So this can be anywhere. It doesn't matter where you do this. But let's call this minting demo. And I'll cd into that. Then I'm simply going to follow these commands. Let's run this. And now we can see that we have those two new key files, the signing key and the verification key. Then we can generate what's called a key hash from the verification key. And this is a little bit different than an address. Take a look at it. This is a public identifier for my key pair, kind of like my address is, but it serves a different purpose. And you're going to see how to use it in this next step. Check it out. What we're going to do next is we're going to make a new file to represent our minting policy script. The extension here doesn't really matter. We're just going to put .script on it so it's easy to keep track of. And the name can be anything. But just to follow with these instructions, I'm going to call my file this for now. Let's just touch a new file called my-token-policy.script. And now I can open the file. And I'm going to grab this little template right here. And it's kind of a JSON format, really. And then we're going to go and replace this key hash right here. But replace it with what? Let's just exit out of this file for a second. And we want to add this key hash right here to our minting script. So I'm going to copy that, jump back in, and we can paste it right here. Okay. And we can see that we are now ready to go. This file, myTokenPolicy.script, is an example of what's called a native script. And when we have a script in this format, we can now derive a policy ID from it. Here's how. There's a simple Cardano-CLI command called transaction policy ID that takes one input, a script file. And since this is an example of one, we can use it. So let's run this command. And right here is a shiny new policy ID, which once again is also known as a currency symbol. And so when we run this transaction in just a moment, the policy ID is going to be this one right here. Now that we have that policy ID, we're ready to set the variables that we can see right here. And don't worry, this is the last time we're going to do this the long way, but let's just take a look. I've already set my sender address to be the one in my PPBL 2024 CLI wallet. And so I can show you that we can say Cardano-CLI query UTXOs on testnet with testnet magic 1, that's pre-prod, and for the address, sender. And what you'll be able to see is I have one UTXO in this wallet. And so now when I start to set these variables, what's the first one I need? It's the TX in. And so that's going to be this one. I only have one UTXO in this wallet. So I'm going to copy that TX hash and then hashtag 0 for the index. There we go. So that's our TX in. What's next? We need a receiver address. I'm just going to send these back to myself. So let's use the same address in this case, but you could use your browser wallet, for example, if you wanted to see this token showing up in Eternal or Nami, for example. Next, we're going to need how many we want to mint. I'm just going to mint one of these new tokens for now. And I need a policy ID. And that's going to be, oh, I didn't write it down. Let's go back and run this command again. There's the policy ID. And finally, I get to this step where I need a token hex. Now, you might remember seeing this when we were sending native assets back in Module 102. But when we represent token names on the blockchain, we have to use a hex string. So if I want to make a token called hello PPBL, I can't just write hello PPBL. I actually have to convert it. And you're going to see in just a minute how to do this directly in Bash. But just to get started, here's a nice convenient tool, stringfunctions.com, where I can type something like hello PPBL. Notice I can use a dash, for example, as well. And then I can convert it into a hex string. And that's actually what I'm going to want to use for my token hex. So once again, we want token underscore hex. And that's our token name. Great. What else do we need? Finally, we need this minting script file. But since I created it in the directory that I'm working in, I should be good, right? So I already have my token policy.script in the current directory. So we can just point to that one and I'll run the command from here. And then I already have my sender and sender key set. Just go back to lesson 102.2 to review how to do that if you haven't already. We should be ready to build, sign, and submit the transaction. And one thing I like to do is just run the build step first to see if it works. Now, one thing you might have noticed up above is that in the sending tokens transaction from module 102, we used a single variable called asset ID, whereas right here we're defining a policy ID and a token hex separately. But this all together, this string, policy ID dot token hex, that's what an asset ID is. Okay, so if you ever hear the term asset ID, what it is policy ID dot token hex. Other than that, I think we've covered the overview of this transaction. Let's just make sure it does build. So I'm going to copy this and drop it into the terminal here. And you can see it works. If I see the estimated transaction fee, that means I have a valid transaction. And you can see that the fee here is a little bit higher than the minimum that's closer to 0.17 ADA. but it's not too much more expensive than a simple transaction to mint one more token. Let's grab the signing and submit steps right here. And then we'll simply wait for this transaction to be confirmed on chain. Once the transaction is confirmed on chain, we can query the sender address again. And indeed, take a look. Here's a new UTXO with one new token that has the policy ID that we just saw in our example and some hex string to follow it. Let's search for this policy ID on Cardano Scan. I'll drop it in right here. I can see there's one token and the asset name is Hello PPBL. Of course, the hex string for that is what we see when we query this address from the command line, 68656C. And as you can see right here, when this hex string is translated to a text string, we can see the name of the token. If you made it this far, congratulations. You just minted your own token with cardano-cli. But hopefully you're getting tired of copying and pasting commands into the terminal. So now that we've done this once the hard way, let's take a look at some scripts that can support our work. That's why we're providing some scripts to accompany this lesson. And this is another big advantage of cardano-cli. You can simply copy and paste commands like this one into a shell or a bash script file so that you can run everything more efficiently. This is all in the repo that we've been looking at. It's in the directory cardano-cli, scripts, and module 202. And let's look at one example right here. Mint native assets is a simple one to start with. Now in this one, you'll still have to do a few things by hand. You can set your sender address and your key, right? This is a pre-prod address. This is the path to your key, just like we've been doing before. And then you can set the variables directly in this script file, save it, and run it. I'm not going to demonstrate that part right now, but I recommend trying to get this script to work. And if you run into any problems, just make sure to reach out for help. The other script provided for this lesson is this one, mint native assets and automate the policy ID. And this is an almost fully automated script that runs both the key gen command and the key hash command from cardano-cli. Then dynamically creates a new minting script, a new currency symbol or policy ID, and then it builds the entire transaction. In order to use this script, you have to provide 3 command line arguments. The first is the address of the receiver. The second is some token name, which down here gets converted to a hex string. All right, so you can see how to automate that part. And then the number of tokens you want to mint. You also have to hard code your sender address and your sender key once again. So let's test out this script to finish up this video. In VS Code, I'm going to open up this file, and here I can add the address of my CLI wallet, and then off screen I'm going to add my sender key before I save this file and start to use it. Okay, the file is ready, and let's navigate to that scripts directory. And the one we want to run is mint native assets automate policy ID. And remember, once again, this takes 3 command line arguments. Let's actually send these tokens over to Eternal. So I have a pre-prod wallet here. We're going to send to that address. And let's call these module 202 example tokens. And let me send 100 of them to that address. Ready, go. All right, now a lot just happened under the hood. What happened? Everything in this script file. One of the things that this script does is it creates a new directory. Where is it? Mint module 202 example. Let's cd into that and see what we've got. Let's take a look at the script file, and you can see it's a new script that should look pretty familiar. This is the pub key hash, so let's look at this matches this. Sorry about my carriage return. And then you can see that we've also got a currency symbol right here. So what's in that file? .cs. So I think we just minted a token with this currency symbol. And that's what I should be able to find over here. Let's see if it came in. Module 202 example, that's the name we gave the token. And you can see it's just a regular text string right here because Eternal is converting the hex string to this name. And we've got 100 of them. And what's the policy ID of these tokens? Let's go take a look on Cardano scan. You can see it right here, 3223C ending in 840. And that's exactly the policy ID we see right here. So this script is working, and actually I'm going to save this folder right here because we're actually going to use some of these files in the next lesson when we explore how to automate token minting in an application front end. We covered a lot in this lesson, and I hope these steps are starting to make sense. Always, if you have any questions, drop by in the Gimbalabs Discord or at a live coding session, or you can even try out our new chat feature here at the bottom of the screen, which allows you to ask questions directly in the lesson. Looking forward to continuing this whole journey with you. All right, take care.